Last night, chaos ensued where a riot broke out in Hare Hills, Leeds. But before anyone even knew the reasoning behind it, there were prominent people spinning a narrative to suit their, let's be honest, Islamophobic and racist agendas. We've had right-wing politicians, we've had GB News pundits claiming it's Muslims, it's failure of multiculturalism. Ollie London, controversial rent-a-gob, said this: hundreds of Muslims riot in Hare Hills, Leeds smashing police vehicles and attacking officers. Meanwhile, this is the town's newly elected local councillor. Is anyone surprised? Now, the person Ollie was referring to is Mothin Ali. He is the local Green councillor. Now, Ollie suggests quite strongly that Ollie was one of the perpetrators, when in fact he was there trying to calm the situation, physically standing up to people who were trying to increase tensions, pulling objects off people who were literally fanning the flames on a big fire that erupted. And we have a video of him here.
Look, he's the only one stopping it.
Brother, leave it.
Leave him alone.
This is our neighbourhood. This is our neighbourhood.
Well, it's going to get worse than it.
Well, don't burn it then.
You wanted it.
Who wants it?
Fire, do it explode.
Don't burn it.
Who's inside that house? You're going to be blamed for their deaths. Think before you act.
There's children in there.
There's families in there. Think before you act.
This is our neighbourhood.
That's right. Those cameras are recording each and every one of us. You have to be at your houses. We've got uncles who did this 10 years ago and they got their whole lives destroyed for doing one little silly thing. Use your brains. Don't get excited.
You've got to live here. This is your community. And you can't treat it like this.
You're right. Yes, brother.
You can't treat it
That's enough. The house is there now. That's enough.
Now, many people have been smearing Mothin Ali, using his face as a Muslim to try and whip up Islamophobia, but he was the hero of the night. Does that stop the right-wing lies? Of course not. Far-right activist Tommy Robinson joined in on the smears, and he said this: let me introduce to the newly elected councillor for the area rioting tonight in Leeds. Multiple reports is even on the streets with them. Alex Phillips, right-wing commentator, claiming, right, this is a race riot. What is happening in Leeds is a race riot. Simple. Now, look, none of us are surprised at the Islamophobia, but Phillips's comments is a new realm of shocking, right? Claiming that it's a race riot, essentially that all brown and black people are starting a war on white people. This is a vile thing to say, and of course, it's not true. But what is the truth? Well, Novara Media are one of the few outlets who are doing really truthful reporting on the ground, as North of England Novara editor Craig Gent was actually there. This is what he said. It is understood children were being taken into care by agency workers. Police attended the scene and people appeared to first throw things at a police car before flipping on its side. Now, elsewhere in the article, Gent reports that residents of all races and faiths came together to try and calm the situation. Now, the information we have so far is that the police have taken children off a Romani family. We don't know why, and without the facts, we shouldn't speculate. So, no, it's not a race riot. It's not Muslims attacking police officers like many people on social media are spreading. Helena, people have been smearing Mothin Ali, who was doing his job, clearly because he's a Muslim. I mean, that's the reason behind it, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. This all started back when he was originally elected. There was a video that went viral of him specifically. I think he said Allahu Akbar specifically when he won his council election.
Yeah, right.
And this was spread around by people saying, oh, this man's a terrorist, etc., etc. When really and truly, it just means God is great. And it's an Abrahamic religion, so it's the same God as the Christian God, technically. So I don't know what they're trying to read into this. But of course, it's just a phrase that people from certain faiths will use in those kind of situations regardless. But it was used to smear him at the time. And of course, they're then digging this up. Max Headroom himself, Ollie London, coming back to talk about this as well. And again, we've all seen they have a specific narrative in their mind that they want to push. They didn't even have any evidence to hand, whatever. They just assumed. Nigel Farage described it as subcontinental behaviour, if you can imagine such a thing. When, of course, the people who were originally doing these problems were people from Europe. And there were, as was been reported in the viral media's coverage of this, the actual ethnic makeup of people who were there doing rioting and also that's trying to stop and cool down the riots were both entirely mixed on both sides in this particular issue. I mean, we literally saw Martinelli trying to grab a whole pallet of a white person to try and stop them throwing it on the fire as well, and then groups of people from subcontinental backgrounds with buckets of water trying to put the fire out. And he said it himself. Martinelli said it himself as well. This is your community. This is your community. It's his community. He's a councillor for this community. And it's important politically. The videos that were going viral were people actually calling him saying, this guy, he's the Green Party councillor for this area, right? He's a good man doing these things. There's a reason why after Grenfell, when Jeremy Corbyn was the first person on the ground to tend to the scene, he was lauded. And when Theresa May took ages to come, she was vilified. When you actually take care of the communities that you belong to, people will recognise that for you politically. And that's very, very important for those. Again, Salma Arif was a Labour councillor, and she was also there as well. I would say, where are the Reform UK councillors? But there aren't any. So they couldn't have come down even if they wanted to. And one last point I would make is that this isn't new. This isn't new of people defending their communities in this way and going viral for it. We all remember in 2011, the lady who was on the streets shouting at people rioting back then in the Mark Duggan riots, telling people this is your community you're destroying. And it's the same thing. And they're both largely, as far as I'm concerned, downwind of the neglecting of certain communities due to lack of investment, due to austerity cuts, right? People can only get into these positions to feel like it's necessary to do these things if their material conditions have been deteriorated so much they feel like they have no other choice.
I'm glad you brought up the earlier video. I think it was before the general election. It was after, actually, it was the local elections, wasn't it? Of Martinelli saying Allahu Akbar, and obviously people are losing their minds, and it literally means God is great. It's no different from a Christian saying I love God, whatever it is. And obviously the dog whistle there is, well, Muslims are dangerous. Now, some people, to move on from that, people criticise Martinelli by saying, and you brought up that point of austerity and investment. He says the community needs investment. They were saying to him, hold on a second, residents in your community are acting violent, they're attacking the police, they're trashing the place, and you make a political point of investment. Obviously, I disagree with that. I think, places that are left behind does need that. But I want to ask you, do you think, obviously, what specifically happened here, we don't have the full facts, but what drives people to such extreme measures in this case? I mean, do you have a kind of analysis behind this, why these things happen? Even if it seemingly doesn't seem like it's connected to austerity, why do people take such extreme measures?
I mean, it's the thing that sets the stage for community discohesion to take hold so that something that does happen can snap and create these issues. So, for example, in this case, I believe, as you said, it was somebody having their children taken away by social services and then the authorities not properly interacting with them that led to the anger bubbling over. But the anger can't exist unless there's a material basis for it in the first place, right? There's a reason why there were basically no riots throughout from 1997 to 2010 when people's living standards were increasing broadly across the country. Yet when loads of communities across the country, in the Thatcher years and in the austerity years, there were riots all the time, loads of different riots across different communities. Again, as far as I'm concerned, there's a basis of community discohesion created by a lack of not just, I think it's also really important to say, it can't just be a singular lack of material access to better conditions, but it's also specifically around that juxtaposed next to other communities that do have it. It's relative poverty and things like this that cause increases in crime, because that's the differential that matters. The difference between, especially when you looked at, for example, the riots in London, people living on poor council estates on one end of the road and £1 million mansions on the other. This is what creates the discohesion that can allow these kind of views to fester over time. And the problem is, of course, is that when you're a liberal, you're an idealist. You believe that it's individuals acting with poor thoughts in their head, the impure thoughts that's made them to do these things, and they're just bad individuals.
To pick up on the liberalism thing, which is quite funny because you wouldn't ever sort of merge the far right and liberalism if we're playing wordplay, but the analysis behind it is exactly the same. Liberals don't have a class understanding. So they'll just think, well, it's ideas that drive the world. And then the right wing or the far right either ignore the class analysis, or they don't have one either, and they think it's simply culture. That is their politics, isn't it? Which is why, I mean, it's fair to say when you see people like Ollie London and Alex Phillips saying, it's to do with the failure of multiculturalism. But you've pointed out, and actually, I didn't even know this, but between the new Labour government, I didn't realise that the riots were fairly low. I mean, obviously, there were problems with that government, but material conditions for people did increase. But given that right-wing pundits are quick to say that multiculturalism's failed, it seems that people from different backgrounds and faiths came together to try and restore order in Hare Hill. So I understand what you're saying in terms of austerity, in terms of funding, that can break down community cohesion. But actually, in the face of what happened last night, we had people from all different backgrounds come together. That's a pretty good thing, right? And that's where right-wingers, that's what they get wrong.
Well, exactly. Like, the biggest line that you hear from these types is, like, they are anti-multiculturalism, is this idea that we are importing an alien culture, is what they say. That's the line that they'll take, which is incompatible with our own culture. And as you can see from the multi-ethnic, kind of, I guess, coalition of people who came down to try and cool the scenes that we were seeing there. Of course, there were people on both sides who were from different ethnicities and from different cultures who were both in the right and the wrong in this situation. But it shows that this idea that culture is this immutable basis for a values set, and whether they can be incompatible or not, is completely blown apart by what we saw both in that what we've seen both now, and of course what we've seen back in 2011 as well. And what does it come back to? Of course, the really important thing here is material conditions. Which communities are in worse material conditions in this country? Broadly, as we've seen, it's ones with larger proportions of people from the immigrant backgrounds, because they get left behind. They deliberately get left behind. They have fewer recourse to public funds. Some would say, of course, but very justifiably. But unless you have proper investment broadly in communities, rather than having that stripped away, that's going to lead to unfortunate tensions arising. But as the right wing, especially like the conservative right wing, don't have a material basis for their analysis of what happens throughout society, they can only fall back on their understanding of culture.
Well, sort of jumping what I said before, that liberals don't have a class understanding, and the right either don't understand or they ignore it. I think that, I mean, I could be wrong here, and you're welcome to disagree, but I feel like the people on the right do grasp it better, but they choose to ignore it. I mean, for example, it might seem like this example's not relevant, but I think it is. When Nigel Farage says that he would scrap the 2-child benefit cap, right? I think you see movements in Europe, right? Some right-wing parties are starting to support more interventionist economic policies. So I do think that the right does grasp material dynamics and class politics, but obviously they don't care about the working class, so they push the culture wars on people, whereas liberals kind of don't understand it. I mean, would you say I'm in the ballpark there? You think?
I think that's reasonable. I mean, we've seen far-right movements essentially come out of left-wing movements throughout, like, the early kind of 30s. And look at Italy, for example, very specifically. Mussolini was somebody who came from a left-wing background who then moved to the far right. They have an understanding of collectivism. Like, that's the one thing that the right and the left share, is they have a collectivist understanding of the world rather than an individualist one. It's just the culture and ethnicity and national focus of the right is completely antithetical to the class-based analysis of the left. I think you're right in that. But of course, I think when I look at people like Nigel Farage supporting more interventionist policy, I think this is more out of a desire to appeal to broad consensus among what people want economically, rather than some grand plan to fix people's material conditions, if you know what I mean.
I'm excited to say that Turn Left has significantly grown this year, and with that, we've managed to produce far more ambitious content, interviewing high-profile people. We did a 12-hour live election show. There are multiple people behind Turn Left, but we are still working around our full-time work. But we would love it if this was our full-time. It means we could dedicate so much more and to bring even more ambitious content. So if you've been here from the beginning, or you've only recently become a viewer, if you like what we do, then you can help us out. Please like and share this video. Make sure you drop a comment. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your feedback. And we desperately need more independent media. If you want to see a socialist media alternative thrive, then you could be part of that. So if you can, you could support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 per month, or any one-off donation. we can use that money to upgrade our equipment, to rent out a proper studio, and to start paying ourselves. This is only the beginning. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.